From the outside, the house on Pinewood Lane appeared no different from any other in the quiet suburb. Its picket fence, painted a pristine white, a lawn meticulously trimmed, and flower beds that boasted a careful selection of seasonal blooms. I had moved into this neighborhood a few months ago, drawn by its serene atmosphere and the comforting illusion of normalcy it promised. The Devereaux family lived next door, and over time, I grew familiar with their routine as it danced seamlessly through the days. Mr. Devereaux left early for work, a punctual man in a comfortably worn suit, while Mrs. Devereaux, a gentle woman with a perpetual soft smile, busied herself with the household chores and the well-being of their young daughter, Clarissa, a bright-eyed girl of 7. Initially, my interactions with the Devereaux family were limited to the polite neighborly exchanges over the fence or brief conversations about the weather as we collected our mail. Their life seemed idyllic, a picture of familial harmony that one might find in a lifestyle magazine. There was something soothing about their presence, a sense of constancy that felt grounding amidst the mundanities of suburban life. It was during one of those mundane exchanges that I first caught a glimpse of the peculiar. Mrs. Devereaux, while tending to her garden, mentioned offhandedly that their family had lived in the same house for generations. Her words resonated in a way that seemed disproportionate to their content, echoing in my mind with an ominous weight I could not quite place. She spoke with an affectionate nostalgia. Her eyes, however, reflected a depth of something I couldn't quite name. Was it sorrow, perhaps, or a resigned acceptance? One evening, as I sat by the window, sipping my tea and watching the clouds cast elongated shadows over our neighborhood, I noticed movement from the Devereaux garden. Clarissa was playing outside, her laughter a sweet tinkling sound that carried on the breeze. There was nothing unusual about a child at play, yet I felt a compelling urge to watch over her, as if drawn by an invisible thread. She moved with an unsettling grace, her footsteps light, though not entirely carefree. As she skipped among the flowers, her laughter suddenly ceased, her frame going rigid as though frozen in time, eyes fixed on something beyond my view. The silence was palpable, heavy with an indescribable tension. Then, just as abruptly, she resumed her play, yet I could not shake the feeling that something had shifted subtly, though irreversibly. As days turned into weeks, I began to notice other disturbances. Whispers, too faint to decipher, seemed to emanate from their house late at night, carried on the wind through the thin walls that divided our homes. I questioned whether it was merely the house settling, the groans and creaks of wood aging with grace, or if I was imagining things, my mind playing tricks on me. But there was an intensity to those whispers that gnawed at my senses, an insistence that refused to be ignored. The disturbances grew more pronounced with each passing day. I observed the lights in the Devereaux house, flickering at odd hours, a staccato dance of shadows and light that made the unassuming structure seem alive. More unsettling still was the way Clarissa's behavior began to change. Her previously bright eyes now held a haunted look, and her laughter, once so innocent, carried an edge of something hollow. It was as if she were being pulled into a world just beyond my grasp, a place where reality blurred with something darker. Driven by a combination of curiosity and concern, I decided to speak with Mrs. Devereaux directly. I found her in the garden, her hands busy pruning the roses with a precision that belied the turmoil I sensed beneath her composed exterior. I approached her casually, my words carefully chosen, aimed at uncovering the source of my unease without causing offense. "Have you noticed anything unusual lately, Mrs. Devereaux?" I asked, feigning casual interest, though my pulse quickened in anticipation of her response. Her hands stilled, the pruning shears poised midair. She turned to face me, the smile that graced her lips failing to reach her eyes. "What do you mean?" she inquired, her tone light, yet I could hear the slight tremor beneath it. "The lights, the whispers. Clarissa seems different," I persisted gently. She sighed, a sound heavy with the weight of unspoken truths. "Some things are part of the family, you see," she replied cryptically, her gaze drifting towards the house as if drawn by an invisible force. Her words sent a shiver coursing through me, the cryptic nature of her response fueling my imagination with possibilities both terrifying and inexplicable. I wanted to press further, to unravel the mystery that hung like a shadow over the Devereaux family. But her expression warned me off, a silent plea to let the matter rest. The nights following our conversation grew increasingly restless. I found myself waking at odd hours, disturbed by dreams I could never fully recall, yet left me drenched in a cold sweat. It was as if the house next door had breached the sanctity of my mind, its presence a constant, inescapable intrusion. One particularly stormy night, as lightning illuminated the suburban landscape in startling white, I heard a sound that made my blood run cold. It was a wail, inhuman and piercing, cutting through the clap of thunder like a knife. The sound echoed from the Devereaux house, a siren's call that resonated with an otherworldly anguish. My instincts screamed at me to ignore it, to lock my doors and close my windows, but an overwhelming sense of dread propelled me towards the source of the sound. The rain lashed against me as I hurried across the yard, my heart pounding in rhythm with the storm. I reached the Devereaux' porch, hesitating only for a moment before knocking on the door, my fist echoing hollowly against the wood. The door swung open, revealing Mrs. Devereaux, her face a mask of calm that did little to hide the turmoil in her eyes. "Please," I breathed, "what is happening?" She hesitated, then stepped aside to let me in. The interior of their home was familiar, yet altered, as if the very air had thickened with an unseen presence. Shadows clung to the walls, and the flicker of candlelight cast eerie shapes that danced and twisted in the corners of my vision. "It's the family," she said at last, her voice a whisper, as though speaking too loudly might shatter the fragile balance holding their world together. "Our bloodline is different. Every few generations, one of us transforms." The word transform hung in the air, pregnant with implication. I felt my mind reaching for understanding, grasping at the threads of a truth too horrific to fully comprehend. Mrs. Devereaux must have seen the disbelief etched on my face, for she continued, her words tumbling over each other in their urgency. "Clarissa, It's happening to her. The curse, it chooses, and we can do nothing but endure. The weight of her confession settled heavily between us, a shared burden that tethered us together in that moment. I wanted to ask more, to understand the mechanics of this curse, the reason behind it, the history that bound their family to such a fate. But the sound of a door creaking open drew our attention. Clarissa stood at the top of the stairs, her small figure outlined against the dim glow of the hallway. Her eyes were wide, filled with both fear and resignation, and as she descended, I noticed a subtle shift in her appearance, a transformation that was both physical and intangible. Her skin seemed paler, her features more pronounced, as if she were shedding layers of herself to reveal something entirely new. Mrs. Devereaux moved to her daughter, wrapping her arms around the trembling child. I watched, rooted to the spot, a silent witness to a scene that defied all logic. The room pulsed with a rhythm that resonated deep within my bones, the very walls seeming to contract and expand in time with each heartbeat. As lightning flashed once more, illuminating the room in stark relief, I saw the shadow of something else, a presence that loomed over the Devereaux family, its silhouette monstrous and formless, a testament to the curse that gripped their lineage. It was gone as quickly as it had appeared, yet the impression lingered, an indelible mark upon my psyche. I stayed with the Devereaux family that night, compelled by a need to offer what little comfort I could, though I knew my presence was but a small balm against the storm they faced. We spoke in hushed tones, our conversation weaving a tapestry of understanding and shared fear. Mrs. Devereaux recounted stories of ancestors who had undergone the transformation, tales of survival and loss passed down through generations like a dark inheritance. The night stretched on, an endless expanse of waiting, and when dawn finally broke, it brought with it a fragile sense of calm. Clarissa slept fitfully, her small body curled against her mother's side, and as I prepared to leave, I felt the weight of Mrs. Devereaux's gaze upon me. "Thank you," she said simply, the gratitude in her voice a quiet testament to the bond that had formed between us. I returned to my home, exhausted, yet unable to shake the feeling that the curse had reached beyond the confines of the Devereaux house, its tendrils entwining with my own life. The events of that night played on an endless loop in my mind, a haunting refrain that refused to be silenced. In the days that followed, the atmosphere in the neighborhood shifted subtly. The Devereaux family maintained their routine, but there was a palpable tension in their movements, a wariness that spoke of battles fought just beneath the surface. Clarissa returned to her play, though her laughter was now accompanied by a haunting echo, a reminder of the transformation that lay just beneath her skin. I found myself more attuned to the nuances of my environment, acutely aware of the shadows that stretched and twisted in the corners of my vision, the whispers that brushed against the edges of my consciousness. The world seemed to pulse with a hidden vibrancy, a secret life that danced just beyond my reach. Though I tried to resume my own routine, the events of that stormy night had left an indelible mark upon me. I felt a kinship with the Devereaux family, an unspoken connection born of shared experience and the knowledge of a curse that refused to relinquish its grip. My dreams continued to be plagued by visions of transformation, the boundaries of reality and imagination blurring in the dim hours before dawn. The lingering fear was not one of imminent danger, but of something far more insidious, the knowledge that the curse was real and that it had irrevocably altered the fabric of our lives. I could see it in the way Mrs. Devereux glanced towards the shadows, in the way Mr. Devereux's smile no longer reached his eyes, in the way Clarissa's laughter carried that haunting echo. The consequence of their lineage was a burden they carried with quiet dignity, and though my own life had been touched by its shadow, I knew that I could do little but bear witness to their struggle. The passage of time did little to erase the memory of that night. It remained a reminder of the thin veil that separated the mundane from the supernatural, the ordinary from the extraordinary. In the end, the story of the Devereux family became part of the tapestry of my own life, woven into the fabric of the days and nights that followed. It served as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of the unknown, a reminder that even in the quietest corners of suburbia, a darkness could linger, waiting patiently for its moment to be seen. I often find myself wandering through the echoing halls of LeBlanc Manor, a place that wears its opulence like a faded garment. The manor, once a beacon of grandeur and sophistication, now stands as a testament to days long past, with its ornate chandeliers casting dim shadows against the dusty walls. The air is thick with the scent of forgotten memories, and each step I take is muffled by the plush, albeit time-worn, carpet beneath my feet. Amber LeBlanc, my cousin, is the reason I find myself here. She is a peculiar figure in our family, the kind of person who inhabits the space between shadow and light, always present, yet somehow distant. Despite living in the manor, she seems to belong to another realm entirely, one that eludes the rest of us. Her letters had always been a source of intrigue, filled with curious insights and musings that hinted at something beyond the ordinary. Thus, when she wrote to me, imploring me to visit, I felt a pull I could not resist. Upon my arrival, I was greeted by Amber, who appeared unchanged by the years. Her eyes, sharp and bright as ever, seemed to hold secrets I was eager to uncover. Yet, there was something in her demeanor, an undercurrent of unease that unsettled me. We exchanged pleasantries, and she led me through the maze of rooms, her footsteps barely making a sound. It was during one of these meandering walks that I first sensed it, a subtle shift in the atmosphere, something I couldn't quite place, but felt down to my bones. It was as though the manor itself had paused to listen, its ancient walls absorbing the whispers of time. We passed rooms filled with antique furniture and faded portraits of ancestors whose eyes seemed to follow us. Amber spoke of the history of the manor, her voice a gentle lull that contrasted with the growing tension in my chest. I found myself hanging on her every word, compelled by a force I couldn't name. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the manor in an ethereal glow, Amber led me to the library. It was a cavernous room, its shelves lined with books that seemed to hum with stories of their own. She settled into a chair by the fireplace, the flickering flames casting playful shadows across her face. "I must show you something," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Her gaze was steady, yet there was an urgency in her eyes that unsettled me. Curiosity piqued. I nodded. She retrieved a small leather-bound journal from a secret compartment in the desk. Its pages were yellowed with age, the ink faded yet legible. She opened it carefully, revealing sketches and notes that spoke of creatures and rituals long forgotten by the world. As I perused the pages, a chill crept over me. The sketches depicted beings unlike any I had ever imagined, grotesque, yet mesmerizing, with eyes that seemed to pierce the soul. The text spoke of a parasitic creature that could masquerade as human, blending seamlessly into society. The idea was absurd, yet the conviction with which Amber presented it was disarming. "Do you believe in such things?" she asked, her eyes never leaving mine. I hesitated, the rational part of my mind grappling with the possibilities. "I suppose anything is possible," I replied, choosing my words carefully. Amber nodded, satisfied with my response. "There's something here," she confided, her voice barely audible. "Something that doesn't belong." Her words lingered in the air, heavy and foreboding. I wanted to dismiss them as the fanciful imaginings of an idle mind, yet there was something in her tone that suggested otherwise. From that night on, my perception of the manor shifted. The once grandiose halls took on a more sinister air, and every creak of the floorboards became a harbinger of something lurking in the shadows. I found myself hyper-aware of my surroundings. Every sound amplified in the oppressive silence. Amber, too, seemed changed. Her once vibrant demeanor had dulled, and she spent long hours locked away in her study, emerging only for meals that she barely touched. I grew increasingly concerned, yet every attempt to broach the subject was met with evasive responses. It wasn't long before strange occurrences began to plague the manor. Objects moved of their own accord, doors creaked open in the dead of night, and the air grew thick with a palpable tension. I could feel the weight of unseen eyes upon me, a constant presence that sent shivers down my spine. One particularly unsettling night, I awoke to the sound of soft, insistent whispers. They seemed to emanate from the very walls, a cacophony of voices speaking in a language I couldn't decipher. Heart pounding, I ventured from my room and wandered the darkened corridors, drawn by the haunting melody. The whispers led me to a small, forgotten chamber at the far end of the manor. The room was shrouded in darkness, yet I could sense the presence of something or someone within. As I stepped inside, the door creaked shut behind me, plunging the room into an oppressive silence. I felt a chill in the air, a sense of being watched by something unseen. My eyes adjusted to the dim light, and I could just make out the figure of Amber standing by the window, her silhouette framed by the pale moonlight. She turned to face me, her expression unreadable. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Amber didn't respond immediately. Instead, she continued to gaze out the window, her eyes distant and unfocused. When she finally spoke, her voice was laced with an unfamiliar edge. "It's here," she said simply. I followed her gaze to the sprawling gardens below, their once vibrant blooms now withered and lifeless. It was as if the very essence of the manor had been drained, leaving behind a hollow shell. "What is it, Amber?" I pressed, a sense of dread settling in my stomach. She hesitated, as if weighing her words carefully. "I've tried to stop it," she confessed, her voice trembling. "But it's too late." The gravity of her words hit me like a physical blow. It was as though the world had shifted on its axis, and I was left to navigate a reality that defied logic and reason. I wanted to deny it, to cling to the comforting illusion of normalcy, yet deep down, I knew she spoke the truth. And so began the escalation. The whispers grew louder, their insistent chorus invading my every thought. The shadows lengthened, twisting and contorting into grotesque shapes that danced at the edge of my vision. It was as if the manor itself had come alive, its ancient secrets clawing their way to the surface. I became increasingly paranoid, my every waking moment consumed by the sense of being hunted. Sleep eluded me, and I wandered the halls in a daze, seeking answers that remained frustratingly out of reach. Amber, too, seemed to be unraveling. Her once immaculate appearance became disheveled, and her eyes took on a haunted quality that mirrored my own. She spoke in cryptic riddles, her words tinged with desperation. One evening, as the storm raged outside, Amber approached me with a proposition. "There's a way to end this," she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil in her eyes. I listened as she outlined her plan, a ritual of sorts, designed to banish the parasitic creature that had taken hold of the manor. It was a last-ditch effort, fraught with danger and uncertainty, yet it offered a glimmer of hope in the suffocating darkness. The ritual was to take place in the heart of the manor, beneath the grand chandelier that had witnessed countless gatherings and celebrations. We gathered the necessary items, a collection of herbs, candles, and symbols drawn from the pages of the journal. As midnight approached, we prepared the space, our movements synchronized in silent understanding. The storm outside intensified, as if reflecting the tumultuous energy that crackled in the air. With the stage set, Amber began the incantation, her voice resonating with a power that belied her frail appearance. The room thrummed with energy, the air thick with anticipation. I watched as the symbols began to glow, their light casting eerie shadows on the walls. It was then that I felt it, a presence, malignant and ancient, pressing down upon us with a force that threatened to crush my very soul. The atmosphere grew oppressive, the air charged with the scent of decay. I glanced at Amber, who stood resolute, her eyes locked on the ritual. I could see the strain etched on her face, the toll it was taking on her frail body, yet she persevered, her voice unwavering as she chanted the incantation. The presence grew stronger, its malevolent force threatening to overwhelm us. I could feel it probing my mind, seeking to exploit my deepest fears and insecurities. It was a battle of wills, one I feared we were losing. In that moment of despair, Amber turned to me, her eyes blazing with determination. "We mustn't give in," she urged, her voice a lifeline in the storm. I nodded, drawing strength from her resolve. Together, we continued the ritual, our voices merging in a harmonious counterpoint to the chaos that surrounded us. The battle raged on, the creature's presence a constant oppressive force. Yet, through sheer force of will, we held our ground, refusing to succumb to the darkness. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the storm abated. The oppressive weight lifted, leaving behind an eerie silence that echoed through the manor. The air was still, the malevolent presence gone as if it had never existed. Amber collapsed to the floor, her strength spent. I rushed to her side, cradling her fragile form in my arms. Her eyes fluttered open, a weary smile playing on her lips. "We did it," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Relief washed over me, mingled with a profound sense of loss. The price of our victory was steep, and as I held her, I knew that the horrors of the manor were far from over. In the days that followed, the manor seemed to breathe easier, its oppressive atmosphere lifted. Yet, the scars of our ordeal remained, etched into the very fabric of its walls. The whispers, though diminished, continued to haunt the corners of my mind, a constant reminder of the darkness that lurked just beyond the veil of reality. Amber, though weakened by the ordeal, retained her enigmatic presence. She spoke less of the creature, choosing instead to focus on the mundane tasks of daily life. Yet I sensed an unspoken understanding between us, a bond forged in the crucible of our shared experience. As I prepared to leave, Amber accompanied me to the door, her eyes holding a quiet strength that belied her frail appearance. "Take care," she said softly, her words carrying a weight of their own. I nodded, the unspoken acknowledgement of our ordeal lingering in the air. As I stepped into the sunlight, leaving the manor behind, I couldn't shake the feeling that the shadows would always be with me, lurking just out of sight. The road stretched before me, a path leading away from the darkness of LeBlanc Manor. Yet, as I walked, I couldn't help but glance over my shoulder, half expecting to see the specter of what we had faced standing in the doorway. The world seemed brighter, the air fresher, yet a part of me remained tethered to the manor, bound by the lingering fear that the parasitic creature might not be as gone as we hoped. It was a shadow that would follow me, a constant reminder of the thin line between reality and the horrors that lay just beneath its surface. The mansion stood solemnly against the amber glow of a Los Angeles sunset, nestled within a forgotten stretch of land that had long ceased to charm the bustling city. Its once glorious gardens now tangled with wild ivy and untamed roses, whispering secrets of a time when the grounds were alive with vibrant blooms and lively gatherings. Yet, the mansion held a peculiar allure of its own, a quiet grandeur that I, a modest gardener in search of solace, found impossible to resist. My first encounter with the estate was through an advertisement that seemed to beckon me specifically, as though the words were penned with me in mind. "Gardener needed," it read, promising a generous sum for tending to the mansion's expansive gardens. A picture accompanied the text, capturing an image of bygone elegance amidst encroaching decay, igniting a curious longing within me to restore what had been lost. Upon arrival, I was greeted by the caretaker, an elderly man named Mr. Croft, with a demeanor as weathered as the estate itself. His eyes bore an indefinable sadness, a hint of shadow that whispered of stories untold. He handed me a key, its intricate design cold in my palm, and said, "The mansion has its rules. Follow them, and you shall be fine." His instructions were simple, yet strangely specific. Never remain in the gardens after dusk. Always speak kindly to the roses. Whatever you do not enter the west wing. The words seemed peculiar, yet there was an earnestness in his voice that left no room for doubt or jest. With a nod, I accepted the key, my heart a curious mix of caution and intrigue. The days bled into one another as I immersed myself in the work. The gardens, though tangled and unruly, possessed a latent beauty that was slowly revealing itself under my care. Each snip of the shears, each turn of the soil seemed to breathe new life into the earth. I found an unexpected peace among the blossoms, and the whisper of leaves under the gentle sway of the breeze was like a symphony composed just for me. Yet, as the sun dipped beneath the horizon, an unease settled over the grounds. The air grew thick, laden with a tension that set my skin crawling. It was subtle at first, a rustle too close, a shadow where there should be none. I adhered to Mr. Croft's rule, retreating indoors before the last light faded, yet curiosity gnawed at my resolve. One evening, drawn by an inexplicable pull, I lingered a moment too long. The garden was cast in the eerie glow of twilight, and as I turned to leave, a soft voice carried on the wind, faint yet unmistakable. "Stay." The sound was a gentle plea, almost mournful in its insistence. I froze, heart pounding, searching for the source. There was no one, only the roses swaying slightly as if reaching out. A chill skittered down my spine, urging me to retreat into the safety of the mansion, the door closing behind me with a definitive click. Sleep that night was elusive, haunted by dreams that blurred the line between reality and nightmare. Images of the garden, vibrant and alive, twisted into visions, plagued by shadows that clawed at the edges of my consciousness. I awoke bathed in sweat, the echo of the whispered plea lingering in the dim light of dawn. Despite the unease, the work continued. The gardens were transforming, their beauty slowly resurfacing from beneath the bramble and decay. Yet, with each passing day, the sense of being watched grew stronger, the shadows deepening with a malevolent presence that I could not escape. I took solace in the rules, clinging to them as though they were a lifeline amidst the rising tide of fear. Curiosity, however, proved a persistent companion. The West Wing, a forbidden mystery, beckoned with a silent allure. Its door was locked, the key long missing or perhaps intentionally hidden. I often paused before it, fingers brushing against the aged wood, tempted by the secrets it held. But Mr. Croft's warning echoed in my mind, a deterrent strong enough to keep my inquisitiveness at bay. One afternoon, while pruning a particularly stubborn rosebush, I noticed something glinting beneath the tangle of thorns. Carefully, I unearthed the object, a rusted key, its shape hauntingly familiar. My heart leapt within my chest, a mix of dread and anticipation warring within me. Surely, it couldn't be. That night, under the shroud of darkness, I found myself drawn to the west wing, the key clutched tightly in my hand. The mansion was eerily silent, the walls alive with a presence that thrummed with anticipation. The key turned smoothly in the lock, the door creaking open to reveal a hallway steeped in shadow. I hesitated on the threshold, the air heavy with a foreboding that pressed against my every instinct. Yet the pull was irresistible, and I stepped inside, the door whispering closed behind me. The hallway stretched on, each step echoing softly, leading me deeper into the heart of the mansion. The room at the end was dimly lit, the air stale and thick with the scent of neglect. Dust motes danced in the faint light filtering through curtained windows, revealing a space frozen in time. Books lined the walls, their spines cracked and faded. A grand piano, its keys yellowed with age, sat silently in the corner, as if waiting for someone to breathe life back into its strings. And there, in the center of the room, stood a mirror, a towering presence that commanded attention. Its surface was clouded, the reflection warped and indistinct. Yet, as I approached, a figure began to take shape, emerging from the depths of the glass with a haunting familiarity. It was me, yet not me. My reflection moved independently, eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that sent a shiver down my spine. Slowly, the image began to change, morphing into something twisted and unrecognizable. A grotesque smile stretched across its face, and I stumbled back, heart racing. The mirror flickered, the room around me shifting, and I was no longer alone. Shadows danced at the edges of my vision, whispering voices rising in a chilling chorus. Panic gripped me, and I turned to flee, the hallway stretching impossibly long before me as I ran. I burst through the door, gasping for breath, and slammed it shut, the key clattering to the floor. The mansion was silent once more, the presence receding into the depths of the forbidden wing. Heart pounding, I retreated to my room, the mirror's haunting image seared into my mind. Sleep offered no respite, my dreams a chaotic swirl of darkness and dread. The garden, once a sanctuary, felt oppressive beneath the weight of unseen eyes. I followed the rules more diligently than ever, yet the sensation of being watched persisted, a constant reminder of the malevolent force lurking just beyond the veil of reality. Days passed in a blur, my work a mechanical routine, devoid of the joy it once held. The mansion, with its secrets and shadows, had become a place of unease, its grandeur marred by the presence that haunted its halls. I longed for escape, yet the pull of the garden, the whisper of the roses, kept me tethered to the estate. One evening, as I stood at the threshold of the garden, a sense of determination welled within me. I had to confront the presence, to understand the nature of the nightmare that had taken root within the mansion's walls. With the sun dipping below the horizon, I stepped into the twilight, heart steady with resolve. The garden was cast in muted hues, the air heavy with anticipation. I moved deliberately, the rustle of leaves a symphony of silent voices guiding me. The roses swayed gently, their petals glowing with an ethereal light, as if urging me onward. As I reached the center of the garden, the air shifted, a chill wrapping around me like a shroud. The shadows coalesced, forming a figure that stood shrouded in darkness, eyes gleaming with an otherworldly light. It was the embodiment of the presence, its form fluid and ever-changing. "Why have you come?" The voice was a whisper, soft yet commanding, echoing in the stillness. I swallowed hard, the answer unformed on my lips, driven by an instinct more profound than thought. "To end this," I replied, my voice steady despite the fear coiling within me. The figure seemed to shift, the garden around us alive with an energy that thrummed with life. The presence loomed closer, the air thick with an intensity that threatened to overwhelm. Yet, within the depth of the shadows, I sensed a flicker of something else, an understanding, a plea. The roses rustled, their petals brushing against my skin like a gentle caress. The presence paused, its form wavering, and for a moment I saw the truth hidden within the darkness. A reflection of myself, twisted by fear and shadow, seeking solace in the garden's embrace. With a breath, I reached out, hand trembling as it passed through the intangible form. The garden shimmered, the presence dissolving into the night, leaving a profound emptiness in its wake. The air was still, the oppressive weight lifting, replaced by a profound calm. The mansion stood silent, its secrets laid bare, the night air cool against my skin. I lingered for a moment, the garden a place of peace once more, illuminated by the pale light of the moon. The roses swayed gently, their whisper a song of hope and renewal, a promise of the dawn to come. As I turned to leave, the voice of the caretaker echoed in my mind, a reminder of the rules that had guided me through the darkness. I had faced the nightmare, confronted the shadows that had haunted the estate, finding within myself the strength to dispel the fear that had taken root. The lingering fear remained, a shadow in the recesses of my mind, a reminder of the unseen forces that lingered just beyond the veil of reality. Yet, as I walked away from the mansion, the garden a sanctuary once more, I carried with me a sense of peace, knowing I had survived the gardener's nightmare and emerged into the light of a new day. I first discovered the garden when I was an inquisitive child, fervent and fearless. Our family estate, a relic of past grandeur, sprawled like an old man too proud to fall. My grandfather had warned me time and again to steer clear of the western edge of the property, where the land sloped down into a dense thicket of trees. He said that it was haunted, that the witch who once lived there had cursed the land, and the wise stayed away. His words were vivid, but ineffective against the curiosity that thrummed through my veins. One late summer afternoon, the sun hung low in a sky so blue it could have been painted. I ventured beyond the familiar stretch of groomed gardens and into the wild, heart thumping with a thrilling mix of fear and anticipation. As I pushed through the overgrown foliage, I stumbled upon a clearing that seemed a world apart from the rest of the forest. It was a secret garden, hidden and untouched by time, vibrant with colors so vivid they seemed otherworldly. The heart of the garden was a single gnarled tree, its branches heavy with fruit that gleamed like polished jewels in the dappled sunlight. The tree, both ancient and alive, exuded an aura that was as inviting as it was unnerving. I stood there, transfixed, my eyes drawn to the forbidden fruit, a mixture of red, gold, and deep purple. They were plump and enticing, nestled among the dark leaves like buried treasure. My hand itched to pluck one, just one, to taste its forbidden sweetness. But just as I reached out, a soft wind rustled the leaves, whispering with a voice I could almost understand. It carried a warning, an echo of my grandfather's tales about the witch who once dwelt here, casting a curse upon any who dared to partake of her bounty. Startled, I withdrew my hand, stepping back from the line I had nearly crossed. I felt the weight of unseen eyes, and an inexplicable chill swept over me, urging me to flee back into the safety of the mundane world. Years passed, and the memory of the garden faded to the back of my mind, a curious echo of childhood adventure. The estate remained my home, its stately decay an ongoing testament to our family's history. Life moved on, yet something in me lingered, a root tied to that hidden place. It was inevitable, perhaps, that I would return. Drawn by a pull I couldn't quite articulate, I found myself wandering the grounds once more, the seasoned air carrying a crispness that heralded autumn's approach. The estate had grown more silent over the years, absorbing the whispers of time into its walls. The garden awaited me, unchanged by the passage of years. This time, I was not a child. Rationality and skepticism were my companions as I stepped into the clearing, but they did little to quell the flutter of fear and curiosity. The tree stood there, as if expecting me, its fruits still gleaming with that impossible allure. My hand reached out almost of its own accord. As my fingers brushed the fruit, the air thickened around me, and the world seemed to pause. The whisper returned, a soft murmur at the edge of hearing, a lamentation and a temptation intertwined. I hesitated, remembering the tales, the curse, the witch who preyed upon those who dared to defy her warnings. But my curiosity proved stronger, or perhaps my skepticism overpowered the fear. I picked a fruit, its skin smooth and cool against my palm, and bit into it. The taste was indescribable, a burst of sweetness that flooded my senses, surreal in its intensity. For a moment, I was suspended in a blissful delirium, the world around me forgotten. The first disturbance came not from the outside, but from within. That night, as I lay in my bed, I felt an unfamiliar sensation, a creeping unease that settled in my bones. Sleep eluded me, chased away by dreams that flitted at the edges of consciousness, tantalizingly elusive, yet disturbingly vivid. I saw the garden, the tree, the fruit, each warped and twisted, their vibrant colors bleeding into shadows that reached for me. Days turned into a blur of restless vigils and growing dread. Strange occurrences began to needle at the fringes of my reality. At first, they were easily dismissed, a misplaced object, a creaking floorboard. But soon, They became harder to ignore. Shadows seemed to lengthen around me, moving with an intent that defied logic. The estate's silence grew oppressive, as if the walls themselves were watching, waiting. The escalation was a slow, insidious agony. My reflection in the mirror began to warp, a stranger's eyes staring back at me with a depth of malice I couldn't comprehend. Voices whispered through the corridors, too quiet to decipher, yet too persistent to ignore. They spoke of longing, of hunger, of a curse that could not be broken. I felt eyes upon me constantly, a prickling at the back of my neck that would not abate. Isolation took root in my heart as friends and family became distant, their concern a veiled accusation. I was alone, trapped in a world that had shifted beneath my feet. The garden became both a refuge and a prison, its allure undiminished, even as its curse tightened its grip around me. I knew deep down that the climax was inevitable. As the days shortened and the shadows deepened, I found myself drawn back to the garden, compelled by a force that was both familiar and terrifying. The tree awaited me, its gnarled branches twisting against the sky like skeletal fingers. The fruits hung heavy, each a reminder of my transgression. Under a moon that cast the garden in silvery light, I confronted the source of my torment. The air was thick with the scent of earth and decay, a reminder of the witch's presence, lingering and powerful. As I stood before the tree, the whispers rose to a crescendo, a cacophony of despair and longing. It was her voice, the witch, calling from the depths of her curse, demanding reparation for my audacity. The shadows coalesced around me, and I felt the weight of her gaze, as cold and eternal as the grave. The garden seemed to pulse with a life of its own, the fruits shimmering in the spectral light, mocking my futile defiance. Desperation clung to me as I reached for another fruit, hoping beyond hope that some hidden truth lay within. But as my fingers brushed against its skin, the whispers ceased, the world holding its breath in anticipation. I understood then, with a clarity born of despair, that there was no escape. The fruit, the curse, the witch, they were all part of a cycle, an eternal dance that ensnared all who dared to cross its path. In that moment of reckoning, I felt the garden shift, its ancient magic binding me to its heart. The witch's presence swirled around me, a specter of vengeance and sorrow. I could feel her curse settle into my soul, a shadow that would cling to me for eternity, the price of my hubris. The garden released me then, the whispers fading into the night, leaving only the haunting echo of its curse. I stumbled back to the estate, my heart heavy with the knowledge of what I had unleashed. The house seemed to cradle me in its decaying embrace, its walls still and silent once more. In the days that followed, the lingering fear took root, a constant companion that shadowed my every step. The garden remained, a forbidden sanctuary that called to me even as it repelled. Its fruits, vibrant and inviting, were a reminder of the witch's curse, of the choices I had made and the consequences I could not escape. I am still here, within the confines of the estate, bound by the ties of family and fate. The garden remains hidden from view, its secrets safely guarded by the shadows. Yet there are moments, fleeting and terrible, when I catch a glimpse of its vibrant colors in the corner of my eye, a reminder that the witch's curse is never truly broken. And in the quiet of the night, when the world is hushed and the shadows stretch across the floor, I hear the whispers return, a lullaby of longing and loss. They sing of the witch, of her power and her pain, and of those who dare to taste the forbidden fruit. It is a song that will haunt me forever, a melody of darkness that binds me to the garden and its eternal curse. The garden had always been a place of tranquility for me, a sanctuary where the burdens of everyday life seemed to lift like mist under the morning sun. It stretched wide behind our old house, bordered by a line of towering oaks and peppered with wildflowers that danced in the breeze. At its heart, an ancient stone well stood sentinel, a relic from a time long gone. As a child, I would circle it, running my fingers over the cool, moss-covered stones, wondering about its depths. The well was said to be a wishing well, a detail that lent it an air of magic and mystery, though I had never been one to believe in such things. My days passed in a gentle rhythm, each one mirroring the last, until the day I decided to clear the garden of the overgrown weeds that had begun to encroach upon the stone path leading to the well. It was a task I'd been putting off, but on that bright spring morning, an inexplicable urge pulled me from my usual routine. As I worked, the garden seemed to hum with a kind of energy, a pulse that drew me closer to the well. As noon approached, the sun hung high in the sky, casting a golden glow over everything. I paused, wiping the sweat from my brow, and approached the well. A rope hung from the beam above it, frayed and aged, yet still sturdy. It was then that I noticed something new. A small, beaten-up bucket resting against the stones, filled with stagnant water. I couldn't recall ever seeing it before, and a shiver traced its way down my spine as I leaned closer. It was the whispering that caught my attention first, faint and indistinct, like the echo of a forgotten dream. I strained to listen, heart pounding in the sudden silence that enveloped the garden. The voice was barely perceptible, yet it seemed to beckon me, weaving promises of dreams fulfilled and desires granted. I shook my head, trying to dispel the unease that had settled over me, but the voice lingered like smoke, curling around my thoughts. In the days that followed, I found myself drawn back to the well with a compulsion that I could neither understand nor resist. The whispers grew more insistent, and it became clear that they were not merely a trick of the wind. There was something, or someone, within the well, and with each visit, the compulsion to drop the bucket into its depths grew stronger. Curiosity, mingled with a strange fear, gnawed at me. Finally, one night, unable to sleep, I ventured into the garden, my path illuminated by the pale light of the moon. The air was cool and still, the only sound the crunch of gravel underfoot. I stood at the well, staring into its shadowy abyss, and then, hesitantly, I lowered the bucket. It dangled for a moment, suspended in the dark, before disappearing into the blackness below. Time seemed to stretch, the world holding its breath. Then, a gentle tug at the rope signaled the bucket's return. It emerged, dripping with water that shimmered in the moonlight, and clutched to its side was a small golden trinket, a token of gratitude, or perhaps a lure. I hesitated only a moment before reaching out, the cool metal sending a thrill through my fingertips. The whispers rose, swirling around me in a cacophony of promises and threats. But beneath them, a new voice emerged, clear and distinct. "Thank you," it said, the words resonating with an ancient power that thrummed through my bones. In the days that followed, I found more trinkets, each one unique, each one more beautiful than the last. The whispers turned to conversations, and I began to learn of the man in the well, a presence who spoke of debts unpaid and dreams unfulfilled. His voice was full of longing, but tinged with something darker, an edge that scraped against my senses. He spoke of a time long past, when the well had been a gateway, a bridge between worlds where wishes were granted for a price. The price, it seemed, had been too high, and the gateway had been sealed, trapping its last visitor within. The man was bound to the well, cursed to grant wishes no more, waiting only for someone who could release him. As days turned into weeks, I found myself caught in his tale, tangled in its threads, as if in a spider's web. My dreams were haunted by visions of the man, glimpses of a shadowy figure within the depths, his eyes glinting in the darkness. The whispers grew louder, more demanding, and it became clear that the price of my curiosity was rising. Despite the unnerving nature of my encounters, I felt a strange kinship with the man. We were both prisoners, he of the well, and I of a life that felt increasingly hollow. I began to understand his desperation, his desire to be free. Yet there lingered a fear, a premonition that to aid him might invite a darkness I could not control. I had always been practical, grounded, but this was unlike anything I had ever known. The man promised to fulfill my deepest desire, to grant a wish that would change my life. In return, he asked only for my trust, for a simple act that would break the seal and release him. It was a decision that weighed heavily on me, and I spent long nights pacing the garden, the moon casting my shadow against the stone path. I debated with myself, wrestling with the morality of the choice before me. Yet, each time I approached the well, the man's promises whispered sweetly in my ear, drowning out my doubts with the siren call of possibility. Finally, compelled by a mixture of hope and dread, I stood once more at the well's edge. The night was silent, the air thick with anticipation, and I knew that I must decide. With trembling hands, I dropped a single coin into the darkness, sealing my fate with a wish whispered into the night. The change was imperceptible at first, a ripple that spread through the air, altering the very fabric of the world around me. The garden seemed to hold its breath, the shadows deepening as the moonlight dimmed. I waited, heart pounding in my chest, for the fulfillment of my wish, but the expected transformation never came. Instead, a deep, resonant laugh echoed from the well, a sound that chilled my blood and froze me in place. The air crackled with energy, and I realized too late the true nature of the bargain I had struck. The man was free, released from his prison, but the fulfillment of my wish was not his goal. In those desperate moments, I understood the depth of my error. The whispers had twisted my desires, ensnaring me in a pact with a being whose intentions were far from benign. The garden, once a place of peace, had become a crucible of fear, the well its dark heart. The man, no longer confined, took form beside the well, his presence a shadow that devoured the light. His eyes met mine, and in them I saw the truth, a hunger that could never be sated, a darkness that sought to consume. My wish had been granted, but at a cost far greater than I had imagined. He vanished then, leaving behind an emptiness that echoed through the garden, a void that could never be filled. The well, now silent, stood as a reminder of my folly, its whispers stilled, its secrets kept. In the days that followed, I attempted to resume my life, but the garden was no longer a sanctuary. The shadows lingered, stretching long and deep, and the memory of the man in the well haunted me. I found myself avoiding the garden, unable to face the stone path, the overgrown weeds a testament to my neglect. Yet the whispers returned, softer now, a gentle reminder of the darkness that lay beneath. The well, though silent, called to me still, a siren's song that I struggled to resist. I understood now the true nature of its magic, a binding, a curse that could never be undone. As time passed, the garden fell into disrepair, the well a forgotten relic of the past. I moved on, seeking solace in other pursuits, but the memory of that night lingered, a shadow that never faded. I knew that the man was out there, somewhere. His presence felt in the corners of my mind, a constant reminder of my hubris. The garden, once vibrant and alive, had become a place of fear, its beauty tarnished by the darkness within. I had learned a harsh lesson, one that I would carry with me always, a reminder that some secrets are best left undisturbed, and that the price of curiosity can be higher than one can bear.